All right, thank you. And I would like to call this meeting of the Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority for Harrisburg to order at 5 p.m. And welcome everyone, and thank you all for your courtesy in adjusting the time so we could be sure we had a quorum for the meeting. And this is A, our last meeting of the year, B, the one in which we are reviewing the city's 2025 budget. So it's a rather important time to be getting together. So I do appreciate your flexibility in that respect. Audrey is on her way. Welcome to Harrisburg 283. And so since we get to capacity built, she would have been here in time. Yeah, so 6 years away. All right, so the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes for the previous meeting, and that's September 25th, 2024. And do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Okay. Comments on the motion, questions, corrections, additions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, the chair's report. Didn't do anything big and lengthy today. The big and lengthy has been over the last 2 weeks, watching the council hearings and last night's budget epic. And but I will say it's been a very good process. And I want to thank Brian. In fact, I would welcome Brian to the other side of the circle here, because Brian is now officially the city's ex officio appointee to the authority. So he does sit in a different capacity now. And but the work that he and his team did in crafting the budget, and particularly in doing so in a way that doesn't draw into reserves and takes into account a number of the comments that we've made along the way. And then marshaling it through the council process, I think is commendable. So we are going to be getting into a discussion of that here in just a couple minutes. The other two things that I wanted to mention briefly, first, LRTA. The city's LRTA was set to expire next week, and the council has now reauthorized it for 1 year on the same terms as the current program. And in the meantime, the mayor is establishing a committee to revisit how it's structured in the city. It has a few unique provisions in terms of who it applies to and how and what rates and for how long. And they would like to see if that's still effective. Number one. Number two, should it be simpler? Number three, are there other ways to use it to improve its utility as an economic development redevelopment tool? So I've been invited to sit on that committee. There are a couple others as well. They're reaching out to council to get one or two members of council to sit on, or their designees. And I believe there will be some from elsewhere in the city as well. So that's clock is for 2025. The hope is to have something to recommend to council for action by the end of 2025, so we can take effect for 2026. Brian, is anything I missed on that?
No, that flow sounds right.
Okay, very good. Very good. The other thing is that, as we heard at the last meeting, Gloria Mark Roberts is putting together a working group. She talked to council about this as well. Council spent a fair amount of time talking about the slow walk that we've been on in getting an economic development plan. And so she has said that she's putting together a work group, and its intent is to be diverse, both geographically in all other respects, but also to draw some expertise in from those who have a stake in the community, so that some of your larger ticket developers, but also some of the small businesses and every stripe in between, to try to get a fair and broad representation and get a full and robust plan put in place. So no clear timeline on that, but it's arguably going to be better than the lack of progress we've seen in 2024. Let's see, the last thing that I want to mention, and this is actually to segue into our discussion of the 2025 budget, is to thank the members of the board for their forbearance and the fact that we were not in a position to call a meeting right in the middle of council's deliberations for you to have an opportunity to review the letter that we sent. And so it was a small project, primarily Audrey and I and Jeffrey, so that we could A, get it done, B, not violate the sunshine law, but C, more importantly, fulfill our responsibility to have comments and recommendations in the council in advance of final passage. And thank you all for everyone who watched the budget hearings or attended and got comments into us. And all of those were used ultimately to inform the letter that we sent. And we will be talking about that in a little bit more detail here, just to make sure that we have clarity and then officially have adoption by the board for the purposes of the record. So with that, may I turn it over to Brian and we can talk about where we are.
All right. Thank you, Chair Hill. I appreciate that. Also, I appreciate my new digs, so to speak here. So.
Got a promotion.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you do that?
Face the audience.
The mayor decided, yeah.
So I also appreciate, actually, it worked out well to have the meeting later today. This morning I got an unexpected call from our auditors, and we're working through finalizing some disclosure related to leases. And he also called me this afternoon, so I was kind of sweating out, trying to get a normal presentation for the board. But the first schedule I handed out is on the general fund summary, and it's the landscaped page schedule. And this is what I normally prepare when I do my monthly reconciliation, and also prepare to send to DCED the requirement for the Act 47 reporting disclosure. So through November, this is reflected as of November 30th. And year to date, the city is basically break even when it comes to revenues and expenses. So we're holding that cash position that is right around the $19.5 million mark at the end of November. One of the concerns about this has always been cash fund balance, and as we move into December, of course, I know what our check run totals are, and of course our payroll figures, because actually tomorrow is the final pay day for both the city payroll and check run. So I have those figures worked out, plus the revenue from the treasurer's report received through yesterday. So right now, the city has with taking all that into account, the city currently has a cash position of 17.7 million. And that still, we still have a few days to go with treasurer's report. And also there'll be a $1 million transfer into the general fund, which represents hotel tax. So that's going to be helpful to boost that cash position. It's kind of tough to project what we're going to be. I'm liking it to be somewhere around the $18 million figure, mainly because, and I think in the 5-year plan, I think we projected around 17, which kind of dovetails. The city just received in this month a significant stop loss payment from its carrier of 1.1 million.
Insurance,
That-
health insurance.
Yes,
Beyond.
right, beyond the cutoff period or the cutoff level. That's good news and bad news, of course, because it reflects how heavy our medical claim expenses have been this year. But that certainly is timely, to get that in the midst of all these heavy claims occurring in 2024.
Brian, if I could ask a question on that subject,
Sure.
if there are additional medical claims that have yet to come in for the rest of the year,
On the expense
on the
side,
expense side,
right?
could there be future stop loss reimbursement? Because you're obviously already over the limit
Right.
for 2024.
And it's possible. I don't have insight because of the privacy issue on that. But I think there are, the reason that payment is so heavy relates to 2 significant medical claims. So it's hard to say where they are if there's a transition or if they're going to continue into next year. That's what makes budgeting that line, so challenging.
So the stop loss is both specific and aggregate. Specific to an individual case, aggregate on total spend.
It's, I have a feeling it's more than one claim,
Mhm.
but it's based on, whatever the incurred amounts are for those particular claims that have been so heavy.
My question was a little different. It's about the type of insurance, but that's okay. Explore that another time.
Right, is it total city, all claims, or is it just per claim per patient?
Oh,
When
well,
when it kicks in.
right, that's on a per claim basis.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not city aggregate total.
Okay, thank you. And one other question, well, two other questions. First, do we ever have issues with the reinsurer that they dispute amounts submitted? And then second, what's the typical timeline for reimbursement?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any questioning or disputes. I mean, there's a staff person up in human resources that's close to that. What is kind of interesting though, too, the city has gone through just recently renewing its insurance coverages because we're October through September based. Now, the stop loss coverage goes December through November. So this huge amount of stop loss that just came in has come from our provider, which has been the provider for a long time. So we just recently switched. So I'm not sure how you can take that too, because it's a new carrier, so they don't have the impact of having to pay what the original carrier is paying. But I'm sure they review our information. Sure. They may even talk amongst themselves.
And they might carry the claim forward, because if it's a claim that they were already responsible for.
Right.
Even though the policy ended at the end of November, they might be responsible to pay out to
That's right.
the end of that claimant's case.
Right. The 1.1 million that we received, I can't tell you where the cutoff is.
There might be more.
There might be more to come, right? But I don't think it would be to that level. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
So that is the presentation on the general funds snapshots.
Are there any other major expenses that the city plans on incurring before the end of the fiscal year?
Well, I sure hope not.
You would obviously know by now.
It's really the unknowns are the medical, and the city also pays claims for workers' comp
Okay.
items or claims. But those are not huge. The medical is the biggest one. That's right. Yeah, the city's completed all of its major big ticket expenditures. All right, I'll move on to the second handout, which is relates back to what we've prepared and submitted to this board for the 5-year plan, the final that was done back in September. And what this is, again, the focus is on revenue, of course, when it comes to our budget building. So what I did, based on last night, the first 3 columns of this schedule are really what is existing in the current 5-year document. So last night's budget, which was approved, and I can, during the course of from September through when we got to budget presentation time, the highlighted or the grayed out lines are the ones I'd like to comment on, because the real estate tax, we increased that by 168,000 compared to the September submission, and that number is actually I feel is more accurate. Hello, Audrey. Oh, right. He didn't get it from me. I'm just getting into reviewing. That's okay. Just reviewing the schedule, which relates back to the 5-year. So I modified real estate tax. We the city receives from the county every month, well, maybe not every month, but when updates happen, our IT department is aware of it, and they generate a end of month tax report that reflects taxable appraisal values on city properties. So we use that because of our, we always use that, but I wanted to take a closer look at that just because of the feel for where we've been hearing about potential declines in appraisal values. So that it's higher than what was presented in the 5-year. I think we were too aggressive as far as, bringing it down. But I feel like that 16.691 million is a reasonable number to base our real estate revenue for next year. The next line down is not very material. It's just licenses and permits. I changed the figure from 459,000 to 400,000. That it's just more it's more in line with actual results in recent years. And actually, right now we're for current year 24, we're at about 383,000. So that's pretty consistent for projecting for next year. Intergovernmental revenue. The big change there relates to the pension system state aid that came in to the city, and it typically happens in September, usually late September. So our for next year, the amount estimated is 4.125 million, which is included in that 9,174,000. It's the biggest part of that. The other big piece is the $5 million of capital fire protection for the city. But the state aid really dramatically increased 2024 between 350 and 400,000. So we felt it was a reasonable move to increase this line by 330,000 for next year's projection. The interfund transfer line. Back when we did the 5-year plan, we were just solely focusing on the $6 million RCAP grant fund award that relates to the stadium project. So when we went further on this budget to try to find supporting revenue for the proposed expenses, we reviewed the other special funds that the city has. And there's interfund support from those funds to the tune of 825,000. And then also, you might recall when I did the presentation back in September on the interest income accumulated on the buildup of funds that related to the receipt of the ARPA funds. So to make this budget work and to avoid using cash fund balance, that's a big piece of the interfund. It's 3.51 million for next year. So coupled with the 825,000 for the other funds, that's what makes up the increase from 6 million.
So Brian, if I could ask a question, the ARPA funds for a while were sitting in like special revenue, and they've now been transferred into the general fund,
Right.
into fund balance, so that they could meet the qualifications of the treasury rules.
Right, to satisfy the revenue compliance classification is utilized. Thus freeing up otherwise other funds in the general fund, which could be moved to, we're using our grants fund to track the initiatives that the county.
Right, so you don't just lose track of everything.
Right.
Which is great, but the question I was gonna ask is the interest that it was earning in that period of time,
During that time.
was that still sitting in the special revenue fund, and did that have to be transferred over to the general fund so that it could be used to expended?
That is, and still is, it's residing in the grants fund.
Oh, it's in the grants.
Right. From the initial deposit of those ARPA funds.
But in the 25 budget, is that going to be transferred out of the grants fund?
That's yes, that from the grants fund into the general fund. That's the interfund transfer.
And that'll help balance the general fund expenditures in 25.
That's correct. And there's no, I think I mentioned this to you, there's no issue with that interest income, it's about sending it back or any restrictions.
So restricted, so it can be spent. It's good that you have it and it can be spent.
Right.
Is that
Right.
What about, things like liquid fuels, they go to the capital fund because that's what they're being used on, not the general fund.
Right, the liquid fuels funds just, it operates on its own.
Okay,
Related expenses that come in relative to road maintenance and capital streets and roads projects.
sure.
It's also paying back a PA infrastructure bank loan. Right. It's a 10-year loan that was obtained for a paving project that's been long been completed.
So you actually do the transactions in the liquid fuels fund.
That's
You
right.
don't move the money out,
Move the money like for the debt, move it from liquid fuels to the debt service fund to pay the debt service.
but with a paving project, you actually do the expense in the liquid fuels. fund.
Yes, correct.
So you're not just holding it, you're actually operating.
Right, right, yeah, using the mainly the allocation the city
Sure.
receives from the state.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are the only changes. All the other lines are identical to what we submitted in 5-year plan. I'd also like to comment on how we're doing that this document. Of course, it includes projections for 2024, and for our real estate tax revenue, we projected almost 17 million, and the city has realized that number year to date right now. So we've achieved that. Another big line item is, of course, the earned income tax line, and we're projecting 18.75 million for this year. And right now, we're running a bit short on that. We're at not quite 18.2, but there are still Keystone Collections. They do weekly payments, and we still have at least one more week to realize an increase in that revenue.
Well, in the new year, when do you start to see revenue from like the real estate taxes, that like March or February? When does the flow of revenue start?
When for real estate tax, typically when the discount period begins, we start seeing it. It takes a while. Usually we're not really seeing significant amounts until like the spring.
So you have revenue 4 times in the first quarter of the new year,
Right.
until the revenue really starts to flow in to the city accounts.
Right.
But obviously you could make it through those times
With
with balances.
and by preserving, of course, the cash fund balance. And then, I mean, the other tax revenues are pretty uniform throughout the year, the EIT, the LST. Those are the big ones. I mentioned, the local services tax, that is, we're projecting 6.8, and we are almost there. We're at about 6.75 now, where we are right now. So I wanted to layer in again what was approved last night. And did you need me to go over anything that was discussed?
How would you like to handle that?
So, well, it's a two-part question, I suppose. One is informing us and the public of your take on where we landed, and then second, wrap that into our discussion, approval of the letters we put together to advise council.
Council made approximately 8 amendments last night, and they were all, for the most part, focused on personnel lines within the general fund. They netted down to a net decrease for the city's budget. The proposed budget was just over 87 million for next year, and the final number is 86,941,802. $86,941,802. And of course, there's no impact on revenue. Our revenue holds because it's a net decrease in expense. The only other fund that was affected was the host municipalities fees fund. where council requested a $59,000 increase into that fund distributes grant-like expenditures. So they increased that line by 59,000. That was the only other fund that was affected last night.
So are you gonna have a slightly larger potential budgeted general fund balance because they lowered anticipated expenditures? I realize throughout the year it might change, but in terms
Right.
of the budget document, it's gonna show a slightly larger
By,
potential fund balance.
yeah, by about not quite $100,000.
As a percentage.
As a that's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and who knows what really happens throughout the course of the year, but, you know, it's the starting point.
Okay. Very good. Any questions on the budget or comments on the budget from members of the board? Or for that matter, the year-to-date financials? I didn't ask for questions on those.
I think I went through last night with council more than once, but last night I just wanted to stress again that it's not a typical city budget, $87 million. So the way to backtrack to a more reasonable number, when you factor out the grant award, the RCAP money of $6 million, the really the one-time utilization of the special funds, the interfund transfers, that's $825,000. The 1.9 million, over 1.9 million is being, oh, I'm sorry. The 3.510, which is the interest income.
Right.
That's not recurring every year. So really, when you back that off, you get down to a total that's right around 72.1 million, which is more reflective of the city's normal recurring revenue. So there's extraordinary revenue items to be matched against several extraordinary items on the expenditure side, which includes the Broad Street Market anticipation, the FMB Field project, and various capital one-time expenditures for next year. So they seem to understand that, but I just wanted, again, it's important to really recognize what is the normal revenue source in total.
But there's no reason to believe the city would be able to have an expenditure budget anywhere near $86 million
No,
in future fiscal years.
that's correct. And of course, I guess it's somewhat better than last year because we had over 100 million in budget, but that was all about the American Rescue Plan Act funds and the transfers.
I doubt there's gonna be any likewise bulge that keeps going forward, so
Yeah.
I think we're done with those days.
Thank you for those clarifications. I appreciate it. Right, to the letter then that we transmitted to council. Originally, council was scheduled to meet tomorrow night due to the final budget, and then got moved up. That's why we had to alter our schedule. So forgive us, but we'll appreciate the comments from members of the board on the content of the letter. I don't know that I really need to read it all. A few of these things are things that we've talked about in the past, most notably in the economic development. We both have some goal setting procedures and performance metrics and some things like that. But I suppose I will comment while you're thinking on the council's hearing process this year. One thing that I appreciate is they added a couple slides into every presentation asking each of the agencies to list their goals for the prior year, their goals for the coming year, and then their performance metrics. And it was telling in a remarkable way that and without surprise, because it's something we've been hitting on for a while, that a few of them had what we might call true and substantial measurable goals and outcomes, nor did they have the metrics to really measure it. There were exceptions to that. There were several agencies that are a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more numeric. The highway department obviously has a little bit easier time figuring out miles of road paved and repaired, and potholes repaired. They also made some comments about looking at those numbers and staff deployment and how they can improve efficiency. So the one offhand comment, we're going to seal while we're doing the paving rather than going back around late in the summer, some things like that. And then a couple of them also commented they were beginning to take advantage of some of the tools in Uni's system, which I think is good that, first off, that they've thought to do that. Second, that those tools are available that can help mostly bureaus improve their efficiency. There were a couple other interesting budget sidelights. If you were following along recent council hearings on the overage in parks and the very late adjustment that they had to make to recover that, and how that was reflected better in the budgeting process this time to truly anticipate the type of profile of temporary employees that they would be getting. So the budget better reflected what they would expect. And so there wouldn't be any surprises, and certainly not surprises after the fact. So comments?
Well, just to follow up on what you said about the overage, I know that last year, I thought the police threw in a lot of money to pay for these employees. And so if they didn't do it again this year, I wouldn't be surprised if they ran
The
into
police
that.
bureau has positions, and if they don't fill the positions for whatever reason, then there's money budgeted. And they can do budget amendments to move that money to cover other expenses. But if those positions are filled, well, now they're using the money that was put aside for the police bureau. So that's where you can instruct your correct.
So I could see how they would get there, because I believe they were very excited and happy with the ability to get the youth off the street into paid positions. And so that enthusiasm sure kept them going forward. I thought the letter was great, and I think it really did. The unfortunate part is that we have to keep repeating certain things over and over again. I mean, if we had $1 for every time we said economic development plan as a priority, the city wouldn't have a problem with the budget at all. And then
You could solve the neighborhood services.
And then the other piece is the performance metrics, which we got a guarantee last year that that was a priority this year. And so encouraging.
I guess I'm still a little bit puzzled on how that overage resulted. If people are supposed to be looking at fund balances and approving things, based on what's there, is there any particular reason that we run into that?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, my understanding, and Brian, you're obviously closer than I am, but I think throughout the course of the warm weather months, they have these temporary employees, many of which are youth, but not entirely youth. And they pay them, and then it's sort of a as needed workforce. So when they have events, they're hourly employees, so they send 2 or 3 or 5 or 7. And they have these events that go on, and they're giving out time, which then results in payroll. And they generally know that they're going over the total amount of money that's put aside for that. But I think as Audrey said, in years past, they sort of come to the administration at the end of the summer and say, let's reconcile. This cost us this year, this cost us this much, and they moved money around from different other places in the budget. It turned out to be in this current fiscal year, a much larger amount of money. And of course, it was already committed and spent because the temporary workers worked and they got their payroll. And now the line item needs to be filled back up, and only council could do that through a budget amendment. And council was surprised that the number was that they had to move, cover that, was as significant as it was. I will say to the administration's defense, they had a plan to fill that. They knew where they wanted to move money from. But council was surprised at the amount of money that needed to be moved to fill up that expense. So is my recollection of how it works pretty accurate, Brian?
It is, and to me, there's similar, there's two major programs that represent those temporary workers. It's the city's like the after-school program and the summer program to benefit youths or kids. I think somebody said it's a good problem to have in terms of it's well worth the spend. But at the same time, what you're mentioning, Kathy, you know, why council doesn't hear about it or see it until like late October, early November, when really the crisis point hit around early August.
Right.
Okay, so, and it was the Parks Recreation and Enrichment budget unit within the general fund. But you're right, somebody needs to be, I mean, the budget manager, of course, is looking. I look at, like, every check run I do, I'm looking at our budget ordinance, our major object categories. I work with the mindset that as long as those categories are staying positive, and of course not, I don't mean like by like $10 positive, right? You know, but that is something that should have been addressed earlier. You know, certainly before, I'd say around September, when you would think the programs are starting to ramp up, and to address the declining available budget. Because at the budget level and also at the department person, department head should be looking at that, seeing, you know, there's signs of trouble here as far as do we have enough to get us, and that's the other thing, to better define what the plan is. And I think that's what council was focused on too, that there needs to be an improvement in developing your budget specifically. You know, what do you really plan on having occurring?
Well, in terms of number of events and number of people at events, because they sort of, I mean, what came out is, and I don't want this to sound like criticism, because they're doing good work, but they sort of wing it. They don't really have.
If we had to overspend, that's probably a good category to
Correct,
overspend.
but it wasn't,
But
it
it's
shows lack of
okay.
planning.
Yeah, it seems like they should know that they are hiring temporary workers at X hourly rate. That X hourly rate translates into Y by the time you add in all your taxes and the other things
Sure,
that
they
have
know
to be
that.
added.
It's actually the assignments that they didn't keep track of. That they'd say, oh, we're going to have an event. How many people should we send, how many employees should we send them? Let's send 7. And that'll be 7 times 4 hours
Whatever,
each.
yeah.
That's 28 hours at their rate. Well, they were sort of winging that part. Like, how many should we send to an event? And it's all part-time employees, so none of these, there's no benefits involved in this. It's just hourly rate.
Well, there are some add-ons.
Well, there's
Yeah.
taxes. Obviously there's taxes, but most of this these are temporary employees. And a lot of them are youth, actually, and they're paying them. So I think what council's saying is, and I don't want to speak for council, figure out how many events, figure out how many people, figure out the rate it's gonna be, and budget for it. Don't just wing it. Because when you wing it, you end up going to council and say, we need $90,000 more, because we've already paid these people.
Yeah, because to me, it's as easy as the number of hours times the rate. And once you hit the max in terms of the hours that can be worked, you don't have more money until you start moving money.
Some
around.
of it, they said they already had commitments to. So for example, when it comes to swimming events, they need to have so many people. And they would say, well, we can't let people, we have to actually bring people in to cover for safety. So that's some of it. That's not all of it. Some of it was just send 4 more people to this event. Or 5 more people, or 10 more people, and that all becomes money. So I think there was a little bit of a disorganization on the recreation departments.
The good news is that obviously they have identified a problem this year and are working to
Absolutely.
change it going
And
forward.
they actually increased the money in that budget line item beyond where it was originally, so that they would have more room to operate in 25.
It just seems to me if you've got supervisors that are letting this happen, that you've got a problem.
Yeah, recreation does that a lot. That's a very common affliction for recreation. Just send some more kids. It got worked out, and that's the good news. And you're
Yes.
right, it was a good problem to have because they had very excellent attendance and very warm weather, and that makes it more expensive also.
Yeah, But
So,
again, that's not an unknown. You have some summers that are hotter than others, so
Correct.
Yes.
you can at least budget for part of that, I would
Okay.
think.
And you could communicate that. There was no communication.
Yeah.
As to we're running into a problem. So it was, we ran into a problem 3 months ago and now we need a budget transfer. That's not the time to talk about. So,
Yeah,
but I think the newspapers, they make it sound like the city didn't have the money. The city did have luckily, had the resources to cover the need, but it shows disorganization.
And if you had multiple departments doing the same thing, we're back where we don't want to be.
Correct.
That's all.
Correct.
But again, the good news is that the problem, well, that the money was there, that it was used for good stuff, and that we're already in the process of trying to address it for next year.
Yeah, I think the Budget and Finance Chair last night re-emphasized that about what you just said, Jeff, about, being more thoughtful, being more organized and, your plan funding, to accommodate whatever the programs are. I think she was trying to even have them develop budgets for each individual
Okay.
project.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I know we don't want to read the letter verbatim, but just for the record, is it possible I can go through what each one of the bullet subjects was? So we could say that this is what we put in. Okay, so and just in the order, the first one had to do with fund balances. The concern that the authority board has had many times that proper fund balances be maintained both in the general fund and the neighborhood services fund. The second one was the receivables in the neighborhood services fund, something that you've heard from us many, many times. There's a concern that we still don't have a full handle on all the outstanding receivables and that there's still aged receivables that are out there. And that's obviously an issue. And the second part of that was kudos to the city for now tracking the individual municipal sanitation customers, the other boroughs. But it's important to make sure that the cost of that service is covering with the revenues from those services. So that's important too. But it's encouraging. It's moving in an encouraging way. Bullet number 3 was, as was mentioned, the lack of a comprehensive economic development plan, which the board here has said many times, and a concern about that. And also a mention of the LERTA extension. So both the working groups that the chairman mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the LERTA working group and the economic development plan working group is positive things, but still no comprehensive economic development plan. The next bullet is something I know Kathy cares a lot about. Still no OPEB trust after all these years, and OPEB trust being a necessity to exit Act 47. So whether we like it or not, OPEB trust has to be dealt with and is still not being dealt with by the city. The next thing was something we already talked about, which is metrics and statistical analysis. What was lacking for most, but not all the departments, but most of the departments and bureaus in the city. And then last was congratulating on the development of a comprehensive capital improvements plan, which is something that's very important to figure out the infrastructure needs of the city going forward. And then there was that extra note, which we often put in saying, we're watching the Broad Street Market project, we're watching the FNB Stadium project, because while we know that there's money, insurance and grant money, there's a concern that over time, there could be gaps that the city's gonna have to invest some of its own money in those projects, because construction projects sometimes don't turn out exactly as you think, and then ultimately it would be the city which would have to come up with additional resources, so that's always a concern for some large construction projects. But those are the things that were in the letter that went to the city council.
Mr. Chairman, I thought the letter did a nice job of synthesizing a number of recurring themes that we've talked about. You know, now for a number of years. I guess the only frustration is we keep talking and some of these things keep reoccurring.
I know that you have administration meetings, or I'm sure you bring this up as well.
We are, yes, we talk. Yeah, probably the longest conversation I had was with Lawyer Martin Roberts about plans. That we had a lengthy meeting, and while part of her defense, so part of her self-defense was righting the ship on a handful of other things, including some of the federal grants. I think we still need to see a true plan for developing the plan. So we have a good sense.
Pre-plan.
Good sense that we want to get a committee together. We want to have this broad type of representation. We want to have these kinds of outcomes, and certainly something more concrete than the fluff we got a little over a year ago. But we haven't quite seen movement on getting the appointments made or meetings.
I know that at the beginning of the Williams administration, they merged economic development with housing. And I think it's time to say that idea failed. And you really need two different people, because they're two different energies that need to be expended. And I don't know how to try to communicate that.
City council mentioned that in their
Okay.
budget workshop. They had the same conclusion. Ultimately, the administration has proposed to keep it that way for 25, but they also, a number of them vocally expressed their dissatisfaction with the merger, and then it hasn't turned out the way that the administration had hoped it would.
I'm assuming one was Asha.
Yes.
Because she and I,
And President Bowers, so they both said, this isn't working. It needs to, their opinion, it needs to change. But ultimately, that's between the executive and the council to work out. So,
The housing, I think, is particularly important in that I know in our neighborhood, we have seen an uptick in homelessness and graffiti that we have never seen before. And I was at another meeting of a major nonprofit in Harrisburg where they were talking about the same thing in Midtown. And those have been probably two of you better neighborhood in terms of economics of late. And when you start seeing that, I think that becomes very worrisome, especially when couple that with the number of vacant storefronts in downtown, which is just depressing.
lack of an economic development plan, you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So it's hard to fill storefronts without a plan.
On an upbeat side, I had mentioned that I had been going up 7th Street more often than I had for years because of a personal change. And there are efforts being made at the Uptown Shopping Center to make that look better, and a major store up there is being renovated, and that's definitely a positive point. So someone here had mentioned that there was a discount store going in up there, but it's a large discount store, and if it works, I think that's just wonderful.
Do you believe, even though it's sort of reverse, that we should have a motion to approve
I
the letter?
think we should, so that we can enter it for the record, represent it that way. So if someone is willing to make a motion,
somebody,
thank you.
Second,
Thank you.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? All in favor, aye.
I
Any opposed? Any motions approved unanimously? Is there anything else that we need to discuss relative to the city finances, financial report, or the 2025 budget? Okay. All right, then let's move along, and we have our annual report.
Yeah, this is pretty routine at this point. I just need authorization from the board in the form of a motion, a second, to have the chair and myself complete the annual report and submit it on behalf of the ICA to the appropriations committees, where we send our report every fiscal year, state fiscal year. So,
So moved.
Thank you. Second, thank you. Any discussion?
we'll have it done by the end of the month.
Very good.
If not the end of the week.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion approved unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the manager's update, paid bill report and all that.
Right, you have the paid bills report, which is a little longer than usual because we had a little bit of a break here. So it covers the period of October, November, and so far December. We have a fund balance for the authority of $128,011, which is a healthy fund balance, and we are still waiting for our next allocation from the state. There was a little mix up, my fault. I'm not good at location codes. Now I know what a location code is. And thank you very much to our Mr. Wood, our friend in the inside track. And we resubmitted for our request for our next allocation from DCED. So I'm not sure what those location codes. I don't know what it even means, but it's a required part of the state invoicing system. So I appreciate your help very much. And that may not be in our books until January, but that's, as you can see, we're doing fine either way. And I do want to add, even though we sort of skipped over it, that for the economic development planning process, the ICA has put aside funding for the city of Harrisburg to join the PA Downtown Center at our expense. And that is in our budget for this year. And we're more than willing to pay their dues for the city to join the PA Downtown Center, if the city would like to join the PA Downtown Center. So we have that, we have offered that several times to the city and to the mayor directly, so, and that is part of our resources we go for them. I don't have anything else. We're set for our 25 schedule, and our next meeting actually would be in January, so it's coming soon.
And the invitations have gone out for full schedule for next year.
Correct. They scheduled the whole year in advance.
Good. Very good. Okay, board, is there any other business?
Just got a couple quick comments. Jeff, I was really impressed with the minutes you took last night. That's a good education on how to do that.
They're not verbatim minutes, they're just the highlights.
Yeah, you nailed that one. Or in your letter, Mr. Chairman, about the proposed 25 budget and the mention in compliance with Act 124, after the budget is adopted, the city may submit the enacted budget as a prose revision to the plan. Is it just as simple as giving you the
revised budget book, the final revised budget book with a cover letter saying, please accept this as a revision to the plan? Because otherwise we go back to the last version, and as you've noted, some of the numbers have changed slightly. So that it sort of brings us forward to the new set of numbers. And that's all that's required.
I wasn't sure if that meant I needed to go back and
No.
read.
It'll be
Easy.
We keep going forward, but there'll be reports in April before you know it, so that's our next.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, shall we move to public comment?
Sure, we have a couple of guests in the audience. I'm sure they have comments or questions. Eric?
It's hard to know where to begin. We monitor the organization. It's been around for over 40 years. Rocky Capital is the latest entity. We go to 200 meetings a year, 200. And I gotta say, first of all, just a slight nudge, it'd be easier if the letter or the handout that had been approved were available. You're one of the entities that don't provide it. We can't compel you to do it, but it's helpful, to read along. But I'm chairman of the finance committee for Central Hall. My budget is 250 million. I'm gonna hit 6 things here that I can't believe are still open issues. And I think you're gonna know what they are. So when you look at the neighborhood service fund, that's been identified from day one. From day one. The city identified it again on their plan on page 16. Now, I don't know what they are, if they're in the 70%, 80%, but again, in my world, the accountability has to deal with either discipline or flatlining a budget, but I don't know what to say with the neighborhood services fund. And if you look at the budget, you're looking at least if your 5-year plan is supposed to be taken on face value, that your expenditures are going to exceed your receivables for the next 5 years. I may be misreading that, but that doesn't seem to be a good thing. I would also point out what hasn't been pointed out here, it seems to be an inability to reconcile audit findings going back 4 years. 4 different audit findings. Now, maybe it's me, but I think financial reporting, segregation of duties, reconciling bank accounts, real property, maybe something to pay attention to. The third issue, in my mind, it's embarrassing, is economic development. Totally unacceptable. I mean, this is, every time I come to a meeting, there's either a new person or a new excuse. And a new person saying the last person didn't do it. So I don't know what else you can say or do, but I just, again, not a deep dive. They keep saying we're gonna improve on their pilots. I know of two, Norfolk Southern and the hospital. I don't know if there are any others, but it doesn't take rocket science to figure out you need a full court press on the nonprofits. If you want the revenue, that's where it's at. If you go to the Bureau of Assessment and Appeals, and again, this is something that the city is normally remiss and doesn't attend, they're getting devalued on a monthly basis. There's nobody there fighting for the property. I attend every Bureau of Assessment Appeals meeting on behalf of the county or the school district. In fact, we did something this year where we increased our intake by 1.1 million. We initiated reverse tax appeals. You're allowed to do it. There's a formula to do it. In my mind, if you're going to get serious, folks, you got to go after the money. You're not going to be driving people out. They're just going to be paying what they should. I thought, honestly, Doug, you had the best description of economic development: slow walk and no timeline. It's like, yeah, this has been slow. I was here for Gloria's presentation. Bizarre and unacceptable. So I don't know how you write that ship. The other point I would point out, and I don't mean to be redundant, there's some other issues ensconced in here, and I don't want to belabor the point, that seem to indicate that these issues are systemic. And I don't know how you change the culture. I looked at the $91,000 deal as poor coordination, poor planning, poor oversight, not the end of the world, you know, based on the money at stake. I don't know how these guys, because the last point is the OPEB. I mean, the city's comments here are very aggressive and very critical. They appear to be negotiating, not wanting to fully fund OPEB. Makes sense. Nobody does. You know, nobody prepays, but you got to do it to get out of Act 47. And I looked over all the documents I've had over the years, and there doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement or a recognition that they've got to meet this criteria. And I think their debt, if I remember correctly, 60 years, 157.6 million. Yeah, it's a big number. And at some point, and I think one of the remedies was interesting, we'll just stop offering the benefit. Wow, really? How are you going to do what you said you were going to do? Retain and stabilize your workforce, take away the pension. So, you know, folks, I just don't know what to say. I think you're doing a good job, but there's a lack of accountability and enforcement, and they're not listening. I mean, it's really hard watching the city council meetings. I mean, the only one more brutal is Pennsylvania Turnpike, and that's brutal. You literally get run over. Actually, we were at a meeting last year where they spent $1.8 billion of state taxpayers' money in 7 minutes without saying a word. Adjourned for lunch. So we've been all around. I remain optimistic. I'm born and raised here. The Uptown Shopping Center, when I was growing up, was unbelievable. We had Grants, the store there, A&P. It was a first-class facility. Across the street was Brenner's, which was a distribution company. Next to Brenner's was D&H. That's how far we've fallen. D&H, Brenner's, and the Uptown Shopping Center. And the Hot Dog King was probably the lowest value store there, but I gotta say, the fact that the person coordinating economic development was excited about $2 stores. That was disappointing. So hope for the best. I don't see it. That I don't want to file a right to know request, but I would like to know what the percentage is. No, the other stuff.
I'll give you the letter.
Yeah, Jeff's gold on that. He's actually, we get along well. But I guess, I don't want to sound destructive and just critical, but I want to end by saying, Jeff, one of the things you said is, I don't want to be critical. I want to be critical, fine. Something's got you all moving because you're moving in the wrong direction. We were at the county today. They increased taxes 21%. Yeah, look, we've been involved, and I'm sure you've been watching what's going on with the county, and we've been involved in that. So assumptions you made about gaming are probably going to go away. I don't know what your assumptions are for rugby moving forward. But the sands underneath us are switching. Yeah, I don't know again what you see in the paper, but most of the board advisory panels are going to be rejiggered. So in my mind, that's a great opportunity for the city to reform partnerships they have with the county. I don't know if you're aware of it or it's a secret. The county and the city don't have a great relationship. I mean, it's better than it was under Eric, but that's not a high standard, you know, Eric. So, you know, we're a resource, happy to help if we can, but you know, it's just disappointing to see this because it's a great city. And we've all done this. Look at Lancaster. I mean, Lancaster's killing it. So I don't know if I thought the city was going to go down to Lancaster and look at lessons learned. So thanks for having us. The brains behind the operation they have. Brian, do you have anything?
I mean, you covered most stuff. I guess my question is, you said the budget the past 2 years got blown out by sort of one-time expenses. Where were we level off? 87 million this year, give a number, where we're level off, do you think?
I think we said that the target for a normal year is about,
Yeah,
72.
around 72.
so a normal year would be about 72 million.
Okay, and then you talked about fund balance problems and that you're not gonna fund the OPEB trust. I guess the other thing is that including the capital improvement plan? And then do you guarantee the grants before you got them? I know for the stadium, is something where it was like, let's say 6 million was gonna get paid by you, 3 million was gonna get reimbursed by a grant. Is that a guarantee for all the construction projects?
Everything that's in the budget has is funded. Everything that they've approved is funded. And no use of fund balance for 25. Which is good, because that's something that the authority has mentioned in years past is not acceptable. Using your savings account to fund your operation.
And really, the only funding sources for the FNB field project would be the anticipated RACP grant and the general fund. There's no other, at this point, there's no.
Well, I guess this is where
You mentioned like another grant. There is no other
Well,
grant.
the state funds a lot of minor league teams.
So RACP is from the RACP.
No, the rest, I know the PCD, but.
Because it seemed like it was a done deal, but you just said the construction costs go up. Just the way other things got budgeted with the kids, I'm kind of worried.
It's a valid concern, Brian, and it is something that we have mentioned in the past. We do with construction, any construction project that's a $6 million construction project. You have to be careful that you live within the budget. So that was our warning. Let's make sure we live within. That's no knowledge of any reason not to.
Well, I get it. All right.
Good, good question. Anything else you'd like to ask us?
No, I guess my thing is, the same, it's actually seven,
It's okay.
He's the eye candy.
we're at 47, so is there any plan to get an OPEB trust? Is that, I feel like
The city does not have currently, and they're required to, but we have not. You'd have to ask the solicitor's office. It's in the hands of Mr. Grover to move that ball forward. It's on his desk.
Jeff, my understanding was that they had a trust document, but they had not appointed a trust board. Is that the last?
That's the last action, and that's been that way for a while.
Oh, yeah,
And thank you guys, because I doubt you're getting paid.
Yeah.
Unless I'm missing something here.
They're not getting paid.
It's a rough deal, so thanks for staying on it, and thanks for the continuity, because most of you are the same since we began covering 4 or 5 years ago. The hot seat seems to be, legal counsel. There seems to be a turnover there. Sounds
Yeah.
like being the keyboard player for the Grateful Dead.
But we try and keep the names the same. We got 2 Mikes, we just got 2 Jeffreys.
Yeah, we try to keep this.
We try and make it easy.
We appreciate you guys coming. Do you have anything that you'd like to ask us? We appreciate the department being here as always. So thank you, appreciate it. And I assume you have anything for us. Thank you for all your help.
Jeff, are we gonna be able to get out? We've been here before where we stayed too late.
He told me that Michael said he would get us out, so that's his name also, by the way. So everybody's Michael.
The guy downstairs.
Yeah, he told me he'd get us out, so if not, we're stopped all night, but they're stacked, so we'll be okay. That's all.
I think there's 10 of us, no matter what, the door opens.
yeah.
All right, no other business coming before us. Before I ask for the motion to adjourn, I'll just thank everybody for the work this year. Thank you to the city for the work in wrestling finances to the ground and the continuing progress that we make against a continuing list of objectives. And so we look forward to working through that in 2025. In the meantime, wish everyone a happy and wonderful and safe holiday.
Right.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Adjourn.
Okay, thank you. 6:07.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah.